Okay, let's discuss the now that we're on Harabias. So you guys saw that I have a piece of the base of Mikdash in my house, right? I showed it to you. You saw it.
I think so. Yeah.
Piece of nice marble that's obviously part of the base of Mikdash in some way. From from what we could gather, it's part of the outer walls of the base of Mikdash because that's the type of marble that they used. It's not paving stone. It's rectangular, and there's all sorts of interesting pieces of marble on Harabias, as you've seen. Some pieces are more of a greenish marble, some are more reddish, some are more white. Right? There's also all sorts of interesting antiquities.
Yeah. Did they use Italian marble? Because the architecture certainly has Roman influences.
The entire structure of the Second Temple is eventually Greco-Roman.
Hmm.
That was a style they used. I doubt, based on what it says in Bava Basra, that they actually used materials that came from what is today Italy. Why? It says that Herod got going really fast, and he made sure that his emissaries asking for permission from the Romans took a long time, right? That way, they couldn't say no. And if he was already waiting for materials to come from Rome or Italy, that would take too long.
Mm.
Okay. It seems, I remember reading in an article, maybe it was 20 years ago already in the news, that they believe they found even the quarry that they used for the Herodian stones that surround Harabais. Okay.
Is it possible
Well,
they added later to it? Think about the Shah Nicanor.
that's a question I had. When was Shar Nicanor put up there? And what year? When was Nicanor?
Isn't it explained in Sotah?
No.
Doesn't say anything about
Second base of Mikdash was a long time.
But,
Came from
yeah,
Alexandria.
yeah.
For all you know, it could be pre-Maccabean. The story is very ambiguous. Okay,
How did they get that name?
Nicanor.
Mm.
Hold on. Jews since Alexandrian times, early Greek times, were using Greek names.
Oh, it was
Alexander.
the name of a Jew?
Yeah, Nicanor was.
No,
Hold on a
but
second.
yeah, of course.
Nicanor. There's a bad Nicanor. Yom Nicanor was a guy defeated by Yudah Maccabee
It's
on
for sure
Erev
not
Purim.
him.
Okay,
Someone else.
so this is the good Nicanor who wanted a Nicanor. Okay, who wanted to do something big for the base of Mikdash. Okay, there are always improvements made in various eras. You read about the spoiling of the first base of Mikdash. We discussed this last year. When were all the treasures of the first base of Mikdash first taken away? About 5 years after Solomon's death.
Hmm.
Okay, it says it in
Yeah.
2 books of the Bible. Pharaoh Shishak came and basically took away the entire temple treasury. He took away the golden shields. He left the first base of Mikdash standing, but he took everything that was of real value. And then they had to start again. They start again collecting things. So you have, by the time of Asa was king and Yehoshaphat, they had recovered a lot. They redonated things. For example, I wonder the 11 golden candelabras that Shlomo Melech had in the first temple. Did those last even 50 years there? Maybe they were reduced back down to one eventually, just like it always was in the second temple. And in the second temple, the Maccabees didn't even have a golden menorah, like the Tosefta has to say. So they eventually moved on up. They started with makeshift spears, and then they got cheaper metals until they could get gold. And by the time they got to later second base of Mikdash times, they had 2 spares, 3 golden menorahs on the second base of Mikdash, 3 golden shulchanos, which is more than necessary because you only need one, but they had spares, so they were doing pretty good. And we always mentioned the Kapores fund. There was one Kapores covered the ark. They didn't even have that. Why are they gathering more? They're gathering more gold to make a new Kapores. What does the Gemara say? It's to coat the Holy of Holies in gold, like it was in the first temple. So every time they got enough gold pieces, they'd melt it down and make another section, just like you have in a synagogue, by the way. They donate a plaque or something like, now this new section is dedicated by, Sadie Goldberg in memory of whoever, right? That's basically what was going on in the second temple. They kept improving to it. So the Holy of Holies, how big was it? Well, it was 40 amos tall, at least 10 amos deep, right? It's a pretty big room. So there's a lot of wall to cover with gold. So every now and then they would go in there and fix a new plaque. By the way, when you think about it this way, it wasn't that they were really scared of the dying by going to the Holy of Holies in order to upkeep it and things like that. That's a later Kabbalistic idea. Okay, of course it wasn't taken lightly, right? But it's not like they were really scared of some sort of magic happening to them, that if they would go in and do something, they would be struck down by lightning.
Doesn't it say in
Yeah.
Rambam that they use lechatchila, they use kohanim to do the construction?
Yes, and if you can't find Kohanim, do use Levium. If not, use Roilim. Yeah. But this thing they did. This is a regular part of the service. Okay, so why did I bring this up? It says in Yechezkel is warning about the destruction of Jerusalem, and it says they're going to lose all their valuables. Now, Das Mikra's good shot over here says that everything. This is basically getting into first what's going to happen with the people are going to be starving, right? And then it's going to talk about Utzviad yo legaon samahu. Okay, the beauty of their adornment or ornament. Okay, and he's basically going to take away everything that they've dedicated to their idols, and then it's going to start talking about the Beis Hamikdash, and this is only said in poetic terms. It says here, "Natativ biad zarim levaz u'shrei aretz l'shalol v'chilaluhu." Okay, I'll give it into the hands of strangers for a prey, and to the wicked of the earth for a spoil, and they shall profane it. Chilaluhu. The object is masculine. By the way, we're going to talk about this next dictative thing. And it says, turn my face away from them. Instead of haster astir, hide my face, turn my face away. Okay. Similar poetic language. It's a mushal for something. And they will desecrate my tzifun, the hidden place, right? Uvalva peritzim v'chilaluha. Okay. The peritzim. What's peritzim? Those are people who break through. Here they translate robbers. I'm using a JTS thing, but I don't think that's the exact thing. Okay? V'chilulua. And they will profane it. This time the object is feminine. Now, this is an important pasuk because there's actually halachic nafkamina over here. I'll bring what the Mishnah says in Me'ilah. It says in the 5th parak, Ein moel achar moel b'mekudashim. We don't have this concept of moel achar moel. That means one person used the holy object, right? And he's violating the Avera of Me'ilah. What is Me'ilah? Okay, well, it's a whole section in the Gemara. It's a Masechta. And the Rambam has laws of Me'ilah. Here, it's from Masechtas Me'ilah. Me'ilah is a person who trespasses. He uses holy property for his own purposes, or he benefits from holy property in a forbidden manner. So, depending on the circumstances, Zadon, Shkaga, etc., what is the punishment? What is the prescribed atonement? Right? It's a whole Masechta. So, let's say I have Muktashim. Okay? If I were to use something, let's say I eat the meat, well, obviously you can't eat it after me, but there is this idea, okay, that there is meal after meal. Like one person uses it, then the next person, every person who uses this thing improperly is hit with an Avera, for which he has to atone or whatever, the prescribed remedy. So they say there isn't, generally speaking, this concept, except with regards to behema uchlei shareth, an animal and kli shareth. So what do they say? Maybe I use the holy animal, and I'm hit with a meal account, and then you use it. The havamid would be that once I did my infraction, somehow or other this has been profaned, and now that you use it, you're using a profane object already, saying it's no longer holy, so you shouldn't be hit with the same prohibition. Klei shareth, for example. I use the cup, the holy cup in the temple for temple service to catch the menachos or the wine or the dam, right? Or the oil, what it might be, and I use it just to drink a cup of water. So that's my me'ilah. Well, whatever it is. No. Okay, whatever it is, but I used it, and then you used it, right? So you'd be hit with a count too. You can't say, well, I somehow ruined it and I profaned it, right? That's me'ilah. So it says kitzad. Rachav al gabi behema. I rode on the animal. You know what? There's a bull. Okay? Bull of muktashim. It's dedicated to the temple. Maybe a korban. Whether or not it's a korban or better kabayis is actually something we'll see in the sugya when we get up to it. The big machlokas, Rashi, Ravid, the Rambam, there's a whole, they would rewrite the entire Rambam there, like a few halachas that the Rav is like, no, you got it wrong. Okay? Let's say holy animal. We're not to describe which type of holy. There's basically two types. It's either actual sacrifice or it belongs to Bedek Abayis, and what are they going to do with it? They'll use its cash value for the purpose of the temple, but also might have to be used as sacrifice. Either way, I wrote on it. And then you come, you, let's have you write on it. And then another fellow came and wrote on the bowl. We all drank out of the golden cup. Some water, some wine, whatever it is. I ripped off some hair from the sin offering. It's a female lamb, right? A kispa. So, why do you don't even have to rip it off. You can cut it with scissors. Why would I shear a lamb? Well, the wool is useful. So I'll take some wool in order to knit myself a yarmulke. And you took some wool, and you took some wool. Doesn't really matter. What happens? Kulan ma'alu. Okay? Everyone who rode on the bull, everybody who drank from the golden cup, everybody who took some wool from this sheep is liable for this avera. Rabbi Omer, kol she'en lo pidyon yesh lo moel achar me'oel. Whatever cannot be redeemed from the temple, because some of the temple has pidyon. You go to the temple sale, the temple is willing to sell you things at a profit, okay, more than the going price, and you could actually take it. And what you take from the temple will become desecrated. Okay, the temple can own a broom. The temple can own even ketores, all sorts of things, and the temple has pidyon. Okay? Someone pays for it. The money becomes sanctified, part of the temple treasury, and it is no longer holy. Okay, that's the concept of Meila that we have to see here. I'm going to skip over here to something from, actually maybe I'm not. I don't know which of these ma'amarim to look at first. We bring out the point. So let's just see it in the order I found it. This is from Rabbi Yaakov Epstein, who's actually a well-known scholar. Okay, God bless him. He has a lot of things, and I saw that when I was going over the sugya, he actually had I think it might be in Hakir, it's one of the journals. So he has all the sources. What does Rabbi Epstein say? Some actually interesting things. We're going to see that. Basically, I like to point this out. This is machlokes, the poskim, and the chief rabbinate. What am I talking about? Okay. Avnei Azara v'Har Bayis shehu chelik mibeis hamikdash. There are stones of the Azara. Okay. What was the Azara? Well, it was a courtyard of the temple, right? The mechitzas of the Azara are in place of the klaim. The klaim were actually part of the Mishkan. You need a klaim, which is basically these poles and linen curtains that were hung between the poles. Okay, to box in the area, there's 100 by 50 amos. And in the temple, they didn't have poles with linen surrounding them, although at a certain point they did. When they were fixing up the temple, they had scaffolding. It says in the Gemara in Adios, right? And it's in Bava Basra, a Mishnah in Adios, and Bava Basra, La Halacha. How they do this? When they had to take down the walls, they still need mechitzas. So, they had minimum sheba minimum while they built the real walls. So they're made of stone. You could see all the artist renditions of these things. And also, Avnei Azar v'Har Bayis shu chelik mi Beis Hamikdash. There are other stones on Har Bayis that are actually part of the Beis Hamikdash. You know why? Because the Beis Hamikdash was huge and it was knocked down. The Beis Hamikdash's skeleton was made out of wood. Wooden frame with stone. So the wood burned and stone fell. And they never brought a bulldozer just to clear the whole place. Eventually they did. The Machon Mikdash now has the Dome of the Rock there. Most of the rubble of the second Beis Hamikdash that's still on Har Bayis is where? On the east side. There are mounds of rubble. You could see that they still have pillars and columns and capitals from the second Beis Hamikdash are still there, and they've been organized in a nice way. But there's still rubble, all sorts of things on the east side of the Beis Hamikdash of Har Bayis. So, and the Waqf has gotten rid of a lot of that. They've just been dumping it, but still a lot of it's there. So what happens? Hayu kedushos lefachot kedushat beta knesset. They're at least as holy as a synagogue, right? Synagogue building material is holy, right? You can't just use it for your own purposes. You have to redeem it, and the money has to go toward building a new synagogue or a Sefer Torah, right? Like the Mishnah in Megillah says. V'hein tu not lichora geniza. So the remnants, the rubble of the temple, should be put in geniza, buried and not used. The chok shekain klei shareth. And of course, if you'd find actual temple implements, service vessels, if you'd find the cups, the knives, etc., that they use in the Beis Hamikdash, so you'd have to put that in geniza. I think it's better, by the way. Why put them in the Geniza, refurbish them, and put them back into use? But either way, let's say you find knives. Beis Hamikdash had knives or tables. They were golden and marble tables in the Beis Hamikdash for various purposes. Okay. Using these vessels, if you'd find them, would be an Isser Me'ilah, as we discussed. The odds of finding, let's say, an actual metal knife or a golden cup or a marble table that was actually in use in the Second Temple is kind of small. The Romans took anything they could have value, right? The Temple Mount has seen a lot of wars. The Crusades were pretty exciting, and many strange hands, foreign hands, have dominated the place, and they've despoiled everything. Maybe we could find something to stone, clay Evan from the Second Temple, achlo clay shareth. Okay, maybe something stone made. However, what's the problem? As I put here in English, service vessels were not made out of stone, but only precious metals. Halacha says they didn't use stone in the Beis Hamikdash. There's, they, like I said, they had marble tables, but anything that you could actually pick up and use was only made out of precious metal. Okay, what is the three precious metals they had back then? The best one was gold, then came silver, then came bronze. Certain things were made out of bronze. What was the most important things made out of bronze? The altar and all its utensils. Anything you used for stoking the fire, anything that got near the fire was made out of bronze, right?
The
Fire pans.
part that touches fire, but the handle.
The handles, they can be made of gold, and they even had golden shovels, for Yom Kippur use. But generally speaking, the major kalim for using on the mizbeach, even when the mizbeach stopped being bronze, it was more made out of stone and plaster. It was made out of what? Bronze. Okay, the mazlegot, those were made out of bronze. Okay, also they didn't use glass so much in the temple. We don't find glass service vessels. Okay, just gold, silver, and bronze.
Why would they? Is it convenient?
Well, nowadays some glass is really fancy, like crystal and stuff.
It doesn't go well with fire.
Well, not for anything in the Beis Hamikdash, like catching the blood. Glass, fancy glass, like wine. They used presumably, okay, they used flasks for wine and oil, and water. Okay.
There's Mishnah Pesachim that
Yeah.
talks about how they have
The cups.
alternating
Gold and silver.
Yeah.
They're generally speaking, but we never saw a place where it says, maybe we don't know about, someone could enlighten us, where glass is disqualified. But it wasn't something they used so much in the temple. Okay? Not going to find it. If there was anything glass, if there was a glass cup from the temple, it's probably been shattered and, pulverized by now.
Remember this Sugya
Go ahead.
Brachot, where it's about the 400, the glass, the cup that's 400 zuz, that they shattered because Chachamim were too happy.
Yeah.
400 zuz is a lot of money. That's a cup.
Yeah. Fancy stuff, what do you call it? Malachim. Okay? If we can mention Malchei Europa today. If you're eating on Shulchan Malachim and you want to drink wine or water, they would not give you a glass or a silver cup. What's the only thing they would drink it out of? What? Glass. Avada. You can't. You drink your wine out of a metal vessel. It ruins the taste. Okay. The dafka. Okay. Malachim are makpid to drink their wine out of glass. So too bottles. Wine is stored in glass bottles. Okay. Yeah. The casks have to be made of a certain type of wood, but if you would store your wine in a stainless steel or silver bottle for a while, you'd ruin it. Okay. So you can understand why I have a hafamina. Lachen, mashinotar ladun alav hu madinon shel avnei binyan v'ritzuf sha'aravim hishtamshu behem shibush mishni u'shlishoni. We're going to talk about the stones that can be used for construction, large stones, whatever. That's what people used to do. That the Arabs have used for some sort of secondary or tertiary purpose. You should know they did that. There's a lot of stones that they use just to pave parts of Har Bayis. It's kind of an insult, You've seen these, looks like all sorts of things. Have you been there lately? Especially on the northeast side, there's a path that looks like, whatever. It's obviously really hodgepodge work of whatever they had. You see, there's different types of stones. Some are obviously new, modern era stones, and some are actually quite ancient looking. Okay. So it's kind of crazy. What about those? Haimish ben adayin kedusha utenot gniza vashimush ben hu milah. Do those stones, pieces of Beis Hamikdash, let's say, should they be put into gniza? And what about using them? What would happen? It seems that this worry of Me'ilah in our days no longer exists. As we saw in the Mishnah just now. You don't have to worry about Me'ilah a second time unless you're talking about an animal or Klei Sharis, implying that if you have stones in the Beis Hamikdash, once someone has desecrated in some way or used a stone from the Beis Hamikdash for his own purposes, the next person will not be hit with the infraction. Okay? So you find a stone. I've been the outer wall of the second Beis Hamikdash. Something's probably been done with it already until this point, so that you doing anything are already touching something that's not there. Ein me'ilah char me'ilah. If it was an actual klisharis or an animal from the Beis Hamikdash, then you'd have a problem. But it's not. It's neither of those, and that's how the Rambam paskins. Hamuel b'kodshei bedek habayit kivan shemal b'shgaga nitchalel kodesh. Talking about Jews, someone who does me'ilah. How would you translate that? Mo'el. Embezzle? Fine. Someone embezzles from something that belongs to the temple. Once he did it, bishgaga, he did it unwittingly. That means if it's a Jew, we assume it's shgaga unless he had been warned by two witnesses, don't do this. Okay? The person who then benefits from it afterwards, the second embezzler, as you would put it, so he is exempt from any punishment. If the first embezzler had done this, on purpose, bizadon, okay, with malice, considering this, and he can't be a korban chatos because he's not a shogeg, so the sanctity has not been desecrated. So the thing is still as it was, sacred. Until someone else comes and once again embezzles, benefits from it, and then he did that unwittingly, and now it's considered it has been desecrated. When did we say this? Rambam says b'shemal b'kodesh v'otzio b'torat chulin. So he took something that was holy, he embezzled it, and he started using it like it's chulin, like it's not holy. V'ikno la'acher, and then he passes it to someone else. Okay, gives it to someone else to acquire. Let's say he uses it, he damages it, but he never passed it to someone else. Once again, there would be a case of moel achar moel, next person also, until someone causes some sort of damage or does something unwittingly. Okay? And once again, like the Mishnah says, another condition for this thing that the next person is mo'ila, not just the first person is, for talking about an animal or a kli. Means if it was just a stone, there is only the first person, whoever touched it and did something with it, is liable. Ketzad. Baka b'kardom shel hekdesh. He used an axe, a hekdesh axe, to chop his wood. V'nebev fruta ufagam, uvachayro uvakabo, v'nebev ufagam, uvachayro uvakavo, v'nebev ufagam. Each one used the axe a little bit and also causes some wear on the axe. Remember, they didn't have stainless steel axes. You have to sharpen your axe all the time. You chop a tree or whatever. Each chopping causes, a little bit of a pagam. Each one, kula mo'alu, okay? Each one did it because we're talking about a kli. It's an axe. It's a kli. There's moel achar moel. Notala kardom, notalo chaviro hu mo'av al chaviro l'mal. If he just took it and he gave it to the other guy, here, birthday present, he did me'ilah. The next one already is not doing me'ilah. Okay? Because there's no damage involved. If the second one person did a shkaga and actually did a real me'ilah, it becomes chulin. Okay. So.
Kardom actually an axe, or is it more like a shovel? In Avot it says that kardom is horbo.
Well.
In Avot it says
pickaxe.
So it's both. Actually.
Ask the Italian guy. He came there. He saw a kid on the street playing with a pickaxe. Okay, mischievous kid. He took out a pickaxe and was like chopping at the street and chopping other kids' toys. Okay, he came and says, "Who? Here's little Cardome." I was like, "Oh yeah, he found the pickaxe." Okay, look, if you're a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old, you found a pickaxe, it'd be kind of fun to play with. Let's just read the Rifid. The Rifid disagrees on some of these points with the Rambam. Okay. Either way, the point is today on the Temple Mount there are no animals left from Beis Hamikdash times, and there's no kalim left. Whatever you find is rubble from the structures that were mechuber lekarka, not kalim. Even if they're still in their place, imagine you can still find the actual walls of the second temple still in their place, which they are not. If a Jew had used them, they're already kulin. If a goy touched them, until this point, by the way, the Rambam was talking about Milah. Only Jews can do Milah. Only Jews have such a concept of Milah. Once again, the mitzvahs, this very specific mitzvahs, only apply to Jews, not Bnei Noach. They have much more simpler terms. V'im Nachri, if it was a guy who did this, Nischalu Yatsu L'chumi Din Bo Poritzim Chilua Kideh. All I ever said now is if a Jew did this. If a guy touched any of the stones, those already have been desecrated because the pasuk says so. Where do I get this from? It's a Gemara. He'll explain soon. In volume 1 of my books, the Chevel Nachalaso series, which we've discussed before, the Siman Yudal, Danti B'musag, Uval Ba Poritzim Cheluha. This quote from Ezekiel. And in this God's treasure place, the Paritzim, we've already said, what does that mean exactly? The invaders, the ones who break through, are going to desecrate it. The Fi Rova Mefarshim, Kivan Shenichnasu Romaim Laichal, according to most of the Mefarshim in the Gemara there, since the Romans entered the sanctuary, Yatzua Binyan Va'kelim Lechulin, the temple edifice, the structure, and the kelim all became chulin. Chulin is the opposite of kodesh. They were desecrated. Kedivrei Rashi. Rashi in Avodah Zarah 52b says, Dichtiv, Uvava paritzim v'chilaluha. Paritzim will come in and desecrate it. Mikivan shenichnesu ovdei kochavim, which by the way is probably a censored version of Rashi. Rashi meant the goyim. Right? Ovdei kochavim, like the rabbi always points out. That's a new Christian type of thing. They censored all our Gemaras and our Rambams and Rashis. And instead of goyim, okay, they put an ovdei kochavim or akum or something like that.
No one, of course, serves the Mars and the whatever stars.
Yeah. So I don't know. I learned my lesson the first year, and I threw out my wife's expensive baking things before Passover. Vanilla extract. Okay, chametz, goodbye. I want to be like the Gra. And I realized if you have chametz, nuksha, and other things that are borderline, you're not quite sure, just sell it. Okay, as long as you're not selling a loaf of bread or a box of Cheerios, okay, just sell it to the guy so you can for shlom bayis sake. So I dedicated a cabinet, and I'm a little bit ironic about it. So I put a sign. I gave the key to the rabbi, and I put a sign on there, Nimkar la'akum. Okay. What does it say here? Because once the bad guys entered the Heichal, Yatsu Kelev l'chulin. They entered the sanctuary. Its Kalim became chulin. By the way, because they're talking about the Kalim in the Gemara. That was the case they're talking about. And also the Ramban in his Chidushin, 2 pages later, Nun Dalet says, Iga de Kashile, Kalim de Achaz Nami. They're talking about Achaz's Kalim. It says in Divrei Yomim that Chizkiyahu Melech, when he took the throne, wanted to really clean out things and set things right because his father Achaz was pretty wicked and desecrated the temple and put idols there and things like that. So what did he do with all the Kalim that his father had desecrated? Now, the deal is, Achaz was a Jew, a Davidic monarch, father of a messianic figure. What did he do with the Kalim? So that's a good question because here we're talking about Romans desecrate the Beis Hamikdash, and now we're talking about Achaz doing it. Even Jews can be as bad as Romans, right? But if a Jew does it, halachas are different. Nami mishum valba pritzim chiluha. Even there are ones who want to say that what Achaz did also desecrated the temple implements such that they were. He desecrated in the colloquial sense. Okay, desecrate like someone put graffiti on the Kotel. It doesn't do anything. It's a disrespect. Okay, it has a halachic legal desecration. Vena kusha. No, that's not so hard. The chi ksiv kra b'farsi goyim ksiv chibush haaretz. When Ezekiel is talking about the pasuk, what's going to happen by the Babylonians and what happened again with the Romans, he's talking about the conquest of goyim, okay, and when they conquer the land also. Aval lo b'Yisrael. It's not talking about when a Jew does it. what they had to do with achos is kalim. Okay, it's kasha. Well, we saw that achos they did other things with the kalim. The answer is yes, because achos was a Jew, and he didn't necessarily profane the kalim. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. We'll see it inside. Okay? All the questions will be answered. Achaz did not destroy anything of the temple, though. He just did a lot. He just added avodah zarah and started using these for avodah zarah purposes, but he didn't physically destroy the temple. The Navi is talking about that the Goyim are going to come and desecrate the actual temple. They're going to destroy the temple. If you have a case of Jews putting idols in the temple, who did that? Achaz. And then 2 generations later, Menashe did it even worse. He did it more blatantly. During the destruction of the temple by Babylonians and Romans, that actually desecrated the temple. Xeras HaKasuv is that when the Gentiles desecrate the temple through the destruction of the conquest, everything becomes chulin. And even though Goyim have nothing to do with the sugya of Me'ilah. Okay? We're going to see this. V'chein divrei Rambam in his responsa. Sheila, ma yomar Adonenu b'davar mi shekananu min abozim sifrei HaKodesh shayu shayachim lechad mibatei knesiyot shebe'arim. It's unfortunate. There was a town that had been attacked by crusaders. And they attacked the synagogues and they stole the Sifrei Kodesh. Where are the Sifrei Kodesh? It means Sifrei Torah and other books of Tanakh, because, like we saw, even the Rambam's time, the Rambam doesn't even mention the Sefer Haftarahs. The Rambam assumes that when you're reading anything from Tanakh, you use Tanakh written on cloth, like the Vilna Gaon, right? That's the way you're supposed to do it. That's what it's meant for. And the Gemara also assumes that not just Sifrei Torah people said Chumashim, which means just one book of the Torah, separate. Chomashim, with a chat of kamatz. I know it's Chumashim, I'm just saying colloquially. How to become Chumash, by the way? The word is Chomesh, like Chodesh, or Chofesh, right? And the plural would be Chomashim, just like Chodashim. Chat of kamatz, regular kamatz, chirik, right? So the plural of Chomesh is Chomashim. So where did it become a kibbutz or shiruk? And the answer, in Aramaic, the plural of Chomashim is Chomshin, with a kibbutz. Okay? So, and they write it with a shiruk because there's no dots. So you read in Yiddish as Chumashim. That's where the word Chumash came from. Okay. Oh, boy. Back to this. So the Rambam was asked about these holy Sfarim that had been taken from one town and one shul. So the Jews see that, I don't know, the pillagers show up at the port of Alexandria, and they're selling what looks to be like Jewish scrolls, you know? And maybe the Goyim don't know how much these things are worth. They're just like, whatever I can get, I got it for free anyways. Or I took it from the actual guy who did the pillaging. I just bought it all for, 50 silver pieces, and I'll see what the Jews will pay me for it, right? If he knows it's Hebrew writing. So a Jew bought them at the port, and now the Jews who've actually lost these things want to know, do they have to pay him, some sort of, pidyon, or they force him just to give it back? Not his to buy. And the Rambam answered, Im zo habiza nestab fkutat sultan. Let's say it was despoiling because some king had commanded them. He says the sultan, but lav dafka the sultan, that's just what he called the king of Egypt at the time. Right? They had been commanded by, I don't know, who's the crusader, the top crusader during the Rambam's time, when the crusades were happening. Godfrey or one of those guys? Okay. Whoever it was. Hare kanahu uvatel din hekdesh. The Goyim who took the Torah scrolls from the synagogue had an active acquisition, and it's not hekdesh anymore. It's not dedicated to the synagogue. Wafilu klei mikdash. The Rambam says even if they despoiled some of the Beis Hamikdash, the Romans took kalim from the Beis Hamikdash. Maybe some Roman soldier wants to sell it. Okay, here, look, I got a chalice from their Jews' temple. How much you pay me for it? La'afilu klei hamikdash im nivzazu batla kedushatan. The Romans took from the base of Mikdash. It's batal. By the way, that which they claim they hold. Who's they? There's some activist types here in Eretz Yisrael, I think with basis, who claim that the Vatican still holds on to ancient kalim. Now, why shouldn't they? The Romans took them away to Rome. They made a big triumphal arch indicating that they took things like the menorah and the shulchan. And by the way, I point out to people every time Parshas Bamidbar rolls around. How'd they carry the Mizbeach? It had staves, right? How'd they carry the shulchan? It had staves. The golden altar had staves, right? How'd they carry menorah? Last time I checked, there was nothing. There was no handles. There's no poles. How'd they carry the menorah? So you look right on the Arch of Titus. It's right there. It had a plank with handles for transporting. The menorah had a plank, and that's what's mentioned in Sefer Bamid in the end of Parshas Bamidbar. This sometimes al hamot. The moat is the plank with the handles. Okay, so they still had a wooden, travel plank for the menorah, even as the Second Temple was destroyed. So all these things are still there. Why would the Romans destroy these things? They're priceless. So they claim that the Vatican has them. Oscar Goldman claims to have seen them. So there are people demanding it back from the Vatican. Well, according to the halacha, at least the way the Rambam and Rashi and the Ramban understood the Gemara, the Kleilim that the Romans took from the second base of Mikdash, even if they still exist somewhere, have no kedusha. Okay, why this pasuk? What does the Tashbeit say in his response? L'omnam shitat bala morva mirisha chalil shechilul hu dafka kisher paritzei Yisrael chilu et Beit Hamikdash. The Balamor and the Meiri say that no, it's when the Jews, the Paritzei Yisrael, do the desecrating. That's when it happens. That's when it did it. They said what the Gentiles do has no effect on the clay base of Mikdash. But we don't think the halacha follows them. I bring from the Tshuva of the Chasam Sofer in Yerodea, Shamata Atzatat Ha'esh Yatzah Mikdash L'chulin in Kol Tichulto. The Chasam Sofer basically says that when the Romans set fire to the Second Temple, when was that? Tisha B'Av. It burned into the 10th. That made everything in the temple, Kol Tichulto, the temple itself and everything in it became chulin. V'lachein kavu et ha'evel dafka bat shi b'av v'lo b'yud b'av. You would have to say that, well, we observe Tisha B'Av because of what happened in Second Temple times. Okay? Really, the Chazal had a question. When should you be observing the destruction of the Second Temple? Most of it burned down on the 10th. And the answer is, yeah, but they set the fire on the 9th. And that, the Chasam Sofer says, they set the fire. Setting the fire is what made it chulin. Okay? And there are other achronim. So Rabbi Epstein concludes with this point. He says, Nira efo shafilu im be'afar. Therefore, it seems from the sources here, by the way, there's more sources indicating this, that if you're talking about the dust from the Temple Mount, Sheutzami Arbayit, remember the Arabs are taking a lot of stuff and just like scooping it all out and dumping it there. Yeshnam avonim shayu chelik me'amikdash. If there are stones there, they're actually part of the temple structure. Okay? V'naflu ishtamshu bahem livniya pam and nusefes. The Arabs had one time used it for something. Okay? Stuck two rocks on top of each other, by the way. By the way, they do this all the time. There's rubble that they love to, you know what they were doing a few times? Back in the harder days of going to Har Bayis. Used to be if they close Har Bayis for a few days because of the holy month of Ramadan. Okay? We should have a safe and quiet Ramadan. Okay? You know what they would do? When the Jews would come back, they'd find that the Arabs had taken a lot of the rubble that's there and basically just piled it up where the Jews need to walk. Created barriers. Okay? That's a me'ilah. They basically they're making piles, not nice piles, but piles of rubble, just so that could be a pile of rubble there and get in the Jews' way. Okay? That's how it ended up there, by the way. You could see it. Have you been there? It's horrible. I remember. Yeah. Okay. They use the pillars, right? The pillars have been moved around. They're easy to roll. They're huge marble cylinders, right? Those things have been moved around a lot for all different purposes. It's been a few thousand years. Okay? So he says, Omnam avonim ele enan kedushot ve'enan teunot kniza. Those stones, therefore, are not holy. They don't need geniza. Umele migia liyad yeled rasis be'evan kazo ein ba kedusha v'yachol litlab kimaz keret. You get some piece of the temple ends up in the kid's hand, so he could take it as a souvenir or a memento, mazkeret. Okay, so that's what my child did. Okay, I was surprised. One of the daughters found something. She brought it back. You can pretty much assume after a few thousand years that this is not an untouched piece of marble. Okay, he says if the Jew did it, but even then, there's two reasons to allow for it. One, someone might have used it already for something. Two, according to the Rishonim, the way they understand the Gemara, the act of destruction of the temple desecrated the actual material of which the temple was made. Okay, and even the kalim, a Jew to desecrate the kli, we saw there's a few conditions. Sometimes the desecration doesn't work. He's hit with the penalty, but the next guy's hit with the penalty because desecration didn't happen. You have to do something in order to affect the desecration, but not with goyim. Okay, so I guess there's more sources here, but for our purposes, we basically went through the sugya, so I'll leave it here. What did I put over here? When we discuss archaeological relics from the temple, it has nothing, what is this, strictly speaking to do with Me'ilah, right? When a Jew is looking at something that came from the base of Mikdash, Me'ilah is a question, right? When a Jew's dealing with it, if there's a base of Mikdash and there's property of the base of Mikdash, there's korbanos, a Jew has to keep the laws of Me'ilah. That means he has to avoid Me'ilah. But the laws of, let's say, impurity and contamination, for example, only apply to Jews. For a Goy, it doesn't exist. Goyim cannot affect Me'ilah. Goyim cannot be hit with Me'ilah. I'll give you an example. A Jew who eats sacrificial meat that he's not supposed to, in certain circumstances, that's Me'ilah. A Goy who does that, it's nothing. He shouldn't do it, but there's no penalty, there's no chatos, nothing happens.
What does this should mean? He has his mitzvot and that's it.
Well, he shouldn't eat it. We don't want him to eat it. He
We
shouldn't be
don't
eating.
want. But
Yeah. Okay. So too, laws of impurity and contamination. You as a Jew have to know what is your bodily state. Have you been to mikvah? Are you a tmei sheretz? Are you a tumas keri? Do you have tumas mace? To what extent have you purified? How many days have you counted? Where can you go? Goyim have no such thing. According to the Mishnah, a Jew can't go here, a Jew can't go there. A Goy, we won't let him do this, can walk right into the Holy of Holies. There's no prohibition that says in the Torah, a Gentile shall not enter the Holy of Holies. You cannot. Okay? We won't let him, but there's no Isser. So too, a Gentile child, how does he prepare himself to go to the Beis HaMikdash? A regular Jew who's over bar mitzvah has to purify. A Goy can go to certain parts of the Beis HaMikdash. The rabbis institute where they shouldn't go. Technically speaking, if it's a place where a Goy can go, he could be a Baal Keri and a Tmei Mace. He could, well, even though there's no such halachic category for him, I mean, he could have just most recently become what a Jew would, he could have done what a Jew would do to make a Jew a Baal Keri. The guy does it, and the guy attends a funeral, and the guy, flings away a dead mouse, right? Gets all the types of tuma. He can still walk into Machane Leviyah, right? Because it doesn't matter how many times he goes to mikvah, paraduma, nothing affects him. Those laws just do not apply to him. So too Me'ilah. Me'ilah is something that's specifically for Jews. Lahefich, this concept that the Goyim come and conquer the temple, or they came and conquered the temple and destroyed the temple, they've basically made the temple and everything in it chulin, for us, is something that we couldn't do necessarily. That's the regard to pair. What Achaz did had to be remedied. Okay? And also, for example, there's the thing, what did the Maccabees do with the stones of the Beis HaMikdash, of the altar? It's a good question. The altar is a kli, or is it not considered a kli? Because technically speaking, it's a clay mikdash. It goes b'chubur lekarka, so it's not really a kli. But then again, the golden altar also eventually became that way. The gold part was attached to the floor of the second temple. Yes, it is. Okay, so those are tricky things, and there it's a little bit more, like I said, tricky. We didn't go into this, but you could read the sources. I'll make them available for anyone who wants. There's a portal. Daf Yomi had a good article about it. This is where the Balamor and the Rambam are arguing. What desecrated the Maccabees' altar. They took apart the altar. So they said, well, it was used for Avodah Zarah. That's something else. That was a chumrah they had. No, he said, maybe it's because Jews used it for Avodah Zarah, Misyavnim. They're the ones who ruined it first. And then the Goyim came and did something. There were Yavanim and Misyavnim. Okay, good question. But notwithstanding, that's what Chazal would say. If you have stones from the temple edifice, the Azaros, it's, whichever way you go, whether Jews did it or Goyim did it, it's now cooling. Now, why is this relevant? Because it's something that happened earlier this year in March, a psak for the chief rabbinate. They're talking about the Kotel. As a little bit of introduction, I'd like to point out that it is a sinister and cynical political ploy to turn the Kotel and the Kotel Plaza into a replacement for the Beis HaMikdash in many ways. Why? Well, everything you do. That's like the big prayer gathering for Am Yisrael, the Kotel. Now, I understand that Six-Day War, you wanted to keep people off the Temple Mount. People were desecrating the temple in the colloquial sense. What were they doing? Everybody just going into the Dome of the Rock, which is terrible, right? There shouldn't be anybody there. No Goyim, no Jews. Should be cordoned off until we could create a plan to rebuild the temple and put the Levium in charge and keep everybody out where they shouldn't be going. So it makes sense to tell people you can't go up on the Har Bayis. But then they created the Kotel Plaza, which historically never existed. Let's say in mandatory times, Rav Kook's times, the Kotel was what? An alleyway between the Kotel and some Arabs' houses where they allowed Jews to daven. Because used to be Jews would try to go wherever they could, even onto Temple Mount, like Rambam's time. And then the Arabs got an idea that they really wanted to stick it to the Jews and make them really feel really bad about this. So they just said, you can have an alley in the southwest corner of the Temple Mount, and there you could daven. And that became the Kotel, which is why the Kotel doesn't exist in Talmudic literature, Mishnaic literature, the Rishonim, the Rambam. If you say, go to the Kotel, he'd be like, what's that? Well, the Western Wall. Well, I mean the Western Wall of the sanctuary, which is up on the Temple Mount? No. It means, this Kotel thing. So the Kotel is a replacement. The Kotel Plaza is holy like Rehov Ha'ir. Rehov Ha'ir is Kedusha like a Beis Knesset because they gather there to pray. So they're not going to bash it. But the politicians and the rabbinic establishment, which has gone hand in hand with the politicians, basically have been using the Kotel as the opiate of the masses, or the opiate of the religious masses. That's their Beis HaMikdash. And we discussed this before. So they treat the Kotel, and this is something that I think is objectionable. They apply certain halachas of the Beis HaMikdash to the Kotel. Even though you could say that the Kotel itself, like the rest of the retaining walls around Har Bayis, has no sanctity whatsoever. Why not? Because Har Bayis exists, right? Har Bayis doesn't need walls, necessarily. They hollowed it out, at least what the Rambam says. There's the Herodian extension. In order to level Har Bayis, which is basically, it's a cube. No, it's not even a cube. It's a rectangular prism. It's like a brick. It looks, by the way, if we could clear out, everything surrounding the Har Bayis today, get rid of all the old city around it, right? It would look like Maras Machpelah. Maras Machpelah from the outside is not a cave. It's a gigantic Herodian era structure, right? A few floors high. The cave is underneath in the ground. On top of the cave, Herod built a huge structure, rectangular, right? That's basically what the Temple Mount is, surrounded by a lot of things nowadays. So how do you turn it into a big rectangular structure? By putting these massive walls all around it and then filling it in, right? So the walls that are here, like you see in the picture over here, these Kotel walls are not Kedushas Beis HaMikdash. They're not the Azara. They're a thing that surrounds Har Bayis. Okay? They were never used, well, whatever. I don't think Herod himself was looking when he had all the funds to rebuild the temple, which funds exactly went to build the walls of the actual Kodesh and the Azaros, and which ones he used, which coins were used to pay for these Herodian stones to surround the Temple Mount. But Chazal say there's actually ways to build. Okay? We're going to see this also in Hilchos Me'ilah. Chazal say that first they use the materials, they do not dedicate the materials. Okay? Give them Kodesh until they're really done with them. Why? Because you're worried that the workers might sit on the bricks or something. Right? That's Beilah. That's a problem. So it is a big stretch to say that the Kotel has any sanctity whatsoever like the Beis HaMikdash. It's a retaining wall for Har Bayis, the extensions thereof. But it is not and maybe it's national treasure, you could say, it's antiquities, but to suddenly say that the laws of Beis Hamikdash apply to the Kotel is a misrepresentation of the halacha and the reality. But what happened? Apparently, I don't know where they got this from, but apparently on the south side, there are large stones that are Kotel-like, Herodian stones, right? Now, you look at the Kotel right now. If you take out one of those huge stones, there'd be a big gap in the Kotel, right? Can you just remove one of the stones of the current Kotel? Is that physically possible? Not really, right? Things on top of it will fall down. You can't take out one of these stones. But apparently there are temple-like, Kotel-like stones that have been on the south side where there's antiquities. There's actually, you could pay admission to go see it, right? I forget what's it called, something or other. It has another dedication. The Sadie Goldberg, like Rabbi Wilk says, Mr. Jesselson's something or other. You can go see it. It's there's an aroma cafe there. It's next to the Kotel Plaza, right? Okay, so you go see this place. Apparently, they took some of those stones and they've been displaying them at various high-profile locations here in Israel, like Ben Gurion Airport. I'll read this halacha. What does it say? Rabbanim Rashim L'Yisrael, Rava Kotel Amaravi, chief rabbis of Israel, and the rabbi of the Western Wall. There's a funny title. He's given rabbi of the holy places and the Western Wall. Western Wall, the holy places. Where are the holy places? He's the rabbi of Harabayas. I don't have one of those. They publicized a call, okay, a united call. They all went together to return all the stones of the Western Wall that are now on display at various institutions throughout the country for Geniza, right, to be put away properly in their original place. They're not really saying what's their original place. If this came out of the Western Wall, how did they take it out of there? Did they dig it out from somewhere underneath the ground or something? It's not quite clear, but they say put them back. Hakriyaba bigvot havarat evan anakit b'mishkal 5 tons. Okay, this call came out in the wake of the transfer of a gigantic stone weighing 5 tons. Okay, how do you lift something with 5 tons? You need a crane to do that, right? Me'avnei Kotel Maravi. Somehow a 5-ton stone that came out of the Kotel Maravi, which itself is questionable. How do you take out a 5-ton piece of stone from the Kotel and no one noticed it? Where'd it come from?
They learned from the Louvre.
Okay, yeah, right. So it says here, "Shenaflu b'churban ba'asini." No, it fell out during the times of the destruction somehow. When the Romans destroyed the temple, or sometime around then, a large 5-ton stone of the Temple Mount's retaining wall fell. I guess it was just sitting right next to the wall. So they moved it. And it says, for example, it was moved from Knesset Tarucha ben Amal Tufa Ben Gurion, originally at the Knesset, and that was put on display at the airport. Ha'even hu avra l'shimush kechelek mimitzag story. This stone was transferred as part of an installation, a display, a historical display. Masha Rabbanim Magdirim ke chilul avnei hakodesh. The rabbis call it, Talmidei Chachamim, watch your language. They say this is a desecration of the holy stones. Now, I just saw this for last hour. When you say chilul, and you're talking halacha and you're rabbis, are you saying the colloquial way or you say it the halachic way? Because if you're saying the halachic way, I don't know if that does it. I don't know if they ever could have been mechulalim. Okay, but you better watch it. If you're saying things in the name of 3 big shot rabbis, you better be talking halacha. Okay? Harishon L'Tzion v'Rav Rashi L'Yisrael, Rabbi David Yosef, the chief rabbi and they call the Sephardic chief rabbi is Rishon L'Tzion, the Ashkenazic rabbi is just called chief rabbi. The Rav Kotel Maravi, Rav Shmuel Rabinovich, said, Hivhiru, they clarified, the Michtav Rishmi, an official letter, Ki Avonim Elu Kodesh Hain. They're Kodesh. Maybe they're just Kodesh like a synagogue, perhaps. Ve'ein lanu reshut lehishtamesh bahem. Well, they took that right out of the liturgy for Hanukkah. It's Kodesh and you can't use it. Ve'ein tzrichot geniza, so you should be put in geniza. Okay, you should put them away. I don't know about that. If you're saying it's part of the Kodesh that fell out of the Kotel, right, when the Romans destroyed it, so just like the Mikdash itself was desecrated, the stones were desiccated through the destruction. So this is a desecrated stone. It fell in, from the destruction. A lot of destruction going on. It's been desecrated by the Romans already, or it's been desecrated by the first Jew to use it. Right? Seems that they used it for something. They put it in installation. They put it on exhibit. Okay. So, and then maybe they charged admission to see it. I don't know. So I don't know which way you go. The Devrehem, next, the other stones that fell off the Temple Mount. It's on the south side. Okay? On the south side, you can see where the wall broke, and there's other stones there, so that's where it came from. That's the answer to the question I had. Gama Rav Rashi Ashkenazi, Rav Kalman Bar, hits Terefla Kriyavid Gish. Even the Ashkenazic chief rabbi, he's new, Rabbi Kalman Bar, joined the call and emphasized, Ki hadavar barur shal pi halacha ein lishtamesh ba'avanim halalu kimutzag muzioni. Okay, you're not to use these stones as some sort of museum display. Sheitan l'taltalim yakom lakom ki tzutzuga shel chefetz v'davar chulin, like you would use with any other, just another unholy object. So the problem is, if even this is part of Beis Hamikdash, it wouldn't be holy anymore. So it brought up a little bit of a controversy. So here's what I have to say. There was a guy who became aware of this piece of the Beis Hamikdash that people have around the house, whatever. And a more learned fellow came to him and said, just like the chief rabbis, you have to put that stone from the temple back, right? Back on Har Bayis, put it back in the Geniza. It belongs to Am Yisrael, it's still Kodesh, and you should put it back in its place. So this fellow who's telling to do that is basically copying and pasting what the rabbis, the chief rabbis, and the rabbi of the holy place said about these Kotel stones. By the way, they're calling it the Kotel Ma'aravi, that somehow it fell off the Kotel Ma'aravi and then up at Kotel Dromi. Okay? It should be Kotel Dromi, not Kotel Ma'aravi then. All right? The Kotel Ma'aravi is complete. Okay? So it fell off from the southern, whatever. Most people, when you say Kotel, you mean Kotel Ma'aravi, the western wall, even if it's the south side. It's like how you say a car has an axle, right? There's one thing they taught me in Hebrew class when I first came to Israel. The back axle of the car is called in Hebrew, guess what? Back axle. Do you know what the front one is called? Not front axle. It's called back axle kidmi. The front back axle. Okay? So this is what they're doing. It's the southern Kotel Ma'aravi. Okay? It's the southwestern wall. Okay? It's the western wall, but on the south side. Okay, fine. By the way, so this fellow was told, like the chief rabbis see a gigantic stone that came from the temple, from the retaining wall of the Temple Mount at Ben Gurion Airport. Give it back. It's Kodesh. What you're doing is desecrating it, yet it's not desecrated. It's Kodesh, and you have to put it in Geniza. So too, if you have a piece of the Beis Hamikdash. But as we saw before, according to the sources, that's not the case. The sources, like Rabbi Epstein says, a child ends up with a stone like this. He could take it as a memento. It's not sacred anymore. So whether it's a stone that a child could pick up in his hand, or it's a 5-ton block, that the size doesn't make a difference in this case. So, like I said, it's a machlokes, the halacha people and the current chief rabbis. Okay, so I told this fellow, I think, all due respect, the chief rabbis perhaps are being a little bit melodramatic and also saying things that aren't halachically accurate, but just because they want to make a point. Like, this is holy in the more colloquial sense, and what they're doing is a desecration. That means they're not using it properly. So you should put it back. Okay, part of Jewish pride. But as actual psak halacha, it's not that serious.